each other. Next door is only a footstep away. Neighbors, everybody needs good neighbors with a little understanding. You can find the perfect blend. Should be there for one another. That's when good neighbors become good friends.
Hot foot from Ramsay Street, Craig McLaughlin drops in on Monday's Wogan to find a certain Jonathan Ross in the chair. Then at 7:30, 3 budding master chefs dream up more palate pleasers for Lloyd Grossman. Talking of food...
You feed him.
A dog's dinner served strictly a la Boswell. At 8:30, the Prince of Denmark is clearly up to something.
To be... or not to be.
After the news at 9:30, Byline with Madhu Jaffrey, listening to volcanoes.
I just had a quarrel with the director. Is that what had caused the eruption? Did we do this?
At 10:20, they're tripping the light fantastic in the second round of Come Dancing 90. And at 10:45, Miami's finest.
Move in, it's going down.
And this is Monday Night on One.
Meanwhile, at 6:30, Karen Smith, one of the 2 teenagers charged with drug smuggling in Thailand, gives her first TV interview. She protests her innocence again, tells how heroin was put in her baggage, describes the squalor of her prison cell, and tries to be optimistic, whatever the future holds.
You're watching BBC1.
The 6 o'clock news from the BBC with Peter Sissons and Moira Stewart.
Good evening. The headlines at 6 o'clock. The government's plans to privatise the electricity industry run into new controversy, which Labour calls the end of popular capitalism. Powergen, the electricity generating company, may be sold off to a single private buyer without being offered to the public. The sports minister gets a new job. He's among the junior ministers moved in Mrs. Thatcher's reshuffle. One of the English girls arrested in Thailand on heroin smuggling charges insists she's innocent. And shares fall on Wall Street amid fears about the American economy. The government announces a major shift in its plans to sell off the electricity industry. Powergen, one of the 2 generating companies it created last year as successors to the CEGB, may now be sold to the highest bidder from private industry, rather than to all comers on the stock exchange. The Energy Secretary, John Wakeham, tells the Commons that a firm and serious approach has come from the international conglomerate Hanson. Labour claims that the privatisation of electricity is now in total disarray and that the move signals the end of popular capitalism. Our industrial correspondent, John Fryer.
The government's plans to privatise electricity have suffered another embarrassing setback. Most of the industry will still be sold off, but not in the way ministers originally intended. The government had wanted small-time investors to have a stake, but today the Energy Secretary said that one of the generating firms, Powergen, may now be sold not to them, but the Hanson Corporation.
I have been approached by Hanson plc, which has expressed a firm and serious interest in making an offer for Powergen plc. I shall need to consider this approach. I have therefore informed the chairman of Powergen about it, and appropriate information will be made available to Hanson.
This statement shows that the government's electricity privatisation programme is now in total disarray. Surely it signals the end of what they used to describe as popular capitalism. The government promised wider share ownership and now propose instead that to sell Powergen to the major contributor to the Tory party's funds.
The first phase of privatisation will be the local electricity boards. They'll be floated on schedule this autumn, raising up to £5 billion. The generators were supposed to follow next February. The old Central Electricity Generating Board has been split into two, National Power and the smaller Powergen. The city thought National Power would raise around £2.5 billion and Powergen at best £1.5 billion on the stock market. But investors look like being shut out of Powergen. Fears have been expressed in the city that the float of the generators may be a flop, coming as it does so soon after the local boards go on the market.
The two companies together will be very large companies. They'll have quite a large capitalisation, and I think it's because government is worried whether the stock market will actually be prepared to cough up that amount of money.
Privatisation of electricity started to go wrong when the true costs of the nuclear stations emerged, and they were pulled out. Cecil Parkinson was the architect of selling off the industry, but now he's been replaced as Energy Secretary and his blueprint's been redrawn. MPs said today the power station sell-off now has echoes of the takeover of the Rover car company. Ministers say the assets won't be disposed of cheaply, and the sale of Powergen will be above board.
Within the last few minutes, Downing Street has announced details of the Prime Minister's reshuffle of junior and middle-ranking ministers. The Sports Minister, Colin Moynihan, moves to the Department of Energy. He's replaced by Robert Atkins. Francis Maude takes over as Financial Secretary to the Treasury, replacing Peter Lilly, who became Trade and Industry Secretary after Nicholas Ridley resigned. Tristan Garrell-Jones, the Deputy Chief Whip, becomes a Foreign Office Minister. Also going to the Foreign Office is Mark Lennox-Boyd, the Prime Minister's Parliamentary Secretary. One of the surprises is the return to the government of a leading poll tax rebel, Sir George Young. David Mellor leaves the Home Office to become the new Arts Minister.
The day's comings and goings, including David Mellor from the Home Office, signal Mrs Thatcher's determination to reshape her government with the next election very much in mind. Richard Ryder had been tipped for promotion within the Treasury to replace Peter Lilly, now in the Cabinet following Nicholas Ridley's resignation. Instead, Francis Maude, the Foreign Office Minister currently in the Far East, was identified as the new Financial Secretary at the Treasury. One government whip hoping for ministerial office was Michael Fallon. A surprise visitor was Sir George Young, who's never been slow to criticise his own government in the past, most notably over the poll tax. He gets a job. And there were several ministers tipped for a sideways move or the sack in Mrs Thatcher's sixth reshuffle in a year. Loyalty is repaid. Tristan Garrell-Jones, the government's Deputy Chief Whip, becomes a Foreign Office Minister. Mrs Thatcher's Parliamentary Private Secretary, Mark Lennox-Boyd, also moves to the Foreign Office. The Prime Minister's new PPS will be Peter Morrison, whose job at Energy goes to Colin Moynihan, promoted from Sports Minister. Angela Rumbold moves up to the Home Office. In this reshuffle, Mrs Thatcher has been concerned with appointing ministers who will contribute new ideas for the next Conservative manifesto. Ministers who will reinforce her argument that the government is not running out of steam.
Well, our chief political correspondent, John Harrison, is at Downing Street now with the latest details. John, what, if anything, does this do to the balance of the government, the political balance there?
Well, there are some intriguing points, of course. I think as far as that key department of the Treasury is concerned, the appointment of Francis Maude is significant. Here is a member of the right wing of the Conservative Party, someone who thinks very much like Mrs Thatcher, someone who in the past has called for the denationalisation of the rail industry, the post industry, as well as electricity. So in that department of the Treasury, very much another soulmate in place in a senior government job. But I think also very significant is the fact that she has put into the Foreign Office, a department, remember, about which she's had suspicions in the past, not least on the European issue. She has appointed those two very close confidants of hers, the Deputy Chief Whip, Tristan Garrell-Jones, and indeed her former Parliamentary Private Secretary, Mark Lennox-Boyd. It would perhaps be a little rash to say they're there to keep an eye on Douglas Hurd, but there certainly will be those who will be suggesting that.
Now, is there a leg up there anywhere for what one used to call the wet wing of the party?
Well, of course, perhaps the biggest surprise of the whole list of names that we've just been getting from Downing Street is the appointment of Sir George Young as a government whip. Remember, as I said just a few moments ago, here is the man who has given this particular government a great deal of trouble over the community charge, over the poll tax, and here he is now going to the whip's office, charged with the responsibility of disciplining Tory MPs who might in the future do what he has been doing in the past. There's an inescapable irony there for sure, but he is certainly on the wet flank of the Conservative Party.
Now, the Prime Minister, I recall seeing recently at a function promoting the advancement of women in public life. Is there any evidence in this reshuffle of that happening?
Not substantially, as far as we've been able to tell so far. Certainly a moving sideways of some women, but not significantly. And of course, you're right to say there has been a great deal of pressure on the Prime Minister to do just that, appoint more women. Before this reshuffle, there were some 5, I think, out of the 17 Conservative women MPs in government jobs.
John Harrison in Downing Street, thank you very much.
One of the British girls arrested in Thailand on drugs charges says that she'd rather face a firing squad than a long prison sentence. In her first television interviews since her arrest, 18-year-old Karen Smith insisted she had no idea there was heroin in her luggage when she was stopped at Bangkok airport last week. 17-year-old Patricia Cahill, who was arrested with her, is being held at a juvenile detention centre. From Bangkok, Gordon Brewer.
Karen Smith's father was back to join her at the start of her 5th day in custody near Bangkok airport. Somehow, Karen is managing to stay cheerful.
We walked in the room, sat down, and we was just messing around. And they opened suitcases, and I was laughing to Tisha, saying, they're going to open it, I'll find some sweets in there, it's going to be funny. But they opened it, then they tipped some out the top, and then there was this plastic stuff with this white stuff inside it. And Tisha burst out crying, just like that, and then I didn't. I just stayed there, dead serious. I don't know what it was.
But it's beginning to sink in that Karen could face over 20 years in a Thai jail.
I'd rather be shot. I'd rather be shot. I really would. I'd rather be shot at World War than be shot.
That's awful.
It isn't awful. I'd rather do that instead of 25 years. I'll be 43 when I come out. I'd rather be shot.
At times, the cheerfulness cracked and Karen seemed close to despair.
Because I haven't done anything. I was really stuck in this grotty little cell in the middle of nowhere in Thailand. 20 hours away from my own hometown. Can I die? Can I die? Strangled.
The other girl, 17-year-old Patricia Cahill, was taken to this court today for interrogation. The authorities here take a tough line on drugs, although they seem to consider the 2 British girls are as much victims as villains. Thai police say they hope that Karen and Patricia's case will act as a warning to other young British tourists, many of whom don't realise that street markets like this one aren't just for souvenirs, but are part of one of the biggest drug centres in Asia. The police say young people should beware of anyone who tries to make friends with them and should never agree to carry anything out of the country, no matter how innocent it may appear. Gordon Brewer, BBC News, Bangkok.
Share prices in New York fell sharply this afternoon because of worries about the American economy and poor performance from some big companies. At one stage, Wall Street fell more than 100. It managed to rally, but a few moments ago, the Dow Jones was down 71. In London, shares also fell. The 100 share index closed down 40.
It's been a hot summer on Wall Street. With plenty of buyers, the Dow Jones has risen consistently, nudging the 3,000 barrier several times. But after a weekend of speculation, there was uncertainty when trading began about which way the market would go. Within an hour, a series of poor company results and increasing worries about the state of the economy led the market into decline. At its worst point, the Dow Jones fell more than 107 points as the program trading computers continued to sell. With the market falling fast, so-called circuit breakers introduced after the crash of 1987 kicked in and slowed down the fall, giving traders a chance to take a breath. As quickly as it started, prices began to recover. Those same computers went on a buying spree, cutting back the losses by up to a half, and all within 2 hours. Why the market fell today is now being analysed. It's being pointed out that in recent months, the Dow Jones, which tracks the top 30 industrial shares, had risen faster than the general market. And many experts view this morning's fall as a correction, bringing the industrial shares back into line with the rest of the market. Richard Quest, BBC News, New York.
Britain's trade deficit rose slightly last month. The balance of payments was £1.36 billion in the red, compared with £1.33 billion in May. This means there'll have to be a substantial improvement in the next few months if the Chancellor's budget forecast of a £15 billion deficit for the whole year is to be met.
British exports fell back £250 million in June, but continue to rise strongly in the April to June quarter as a whole. Exports excluding oil and erratic items rose at an annual rate of nearly 20% between the first and second quarters, benefiting from the strong growth of export markets, especially Germany. But the current account deficit, which reached a record £19 billion in 1989, remained high in the first quarter of this year. The second quarter improved by a useful amount to £4.3 billion. But the deficit in the third and fourth quarters will have to average a much smaller £3 billion if the Chancellor's £15 billion forecast for 1990 as a whole is to be met. The Treasury, meanwhile, drew encouragement from the fact that for 10 months now the trend of export volume has been rising faster than the trend of import volume. But the opposition pointed out the continuing large balance of payments deficit with most of Britain's trading partners.
With the deficit now at £9 billion for the first 6 months of the year, this is the worst first half of any year in our trading history. The figures today explode the myth that the economy is improving.
Liberal Democrat Treasury spokesman Alan Beath commented that Britain would remain uncompetitive until the government tackled fundamental problems like education and training, research and development, the British system of financing industry. The Chancellor, in Brussels today to sell his plan for a new 12th common currency for Europe to his fellow finance ministers, would like to take the pound into the common market's exchange rate mechanism and to be able to cut interest rates in the autumn. But he and the Prime Minister know that that would mean joining well before Britain's inflation rate comes down to the average in the other common market countries. In that event, a high fixed value for the pound would help to squeeze inflation only by increasing the balance of payments deficit.
Later in this news, 15 days without rain. Officially, that makes it a drought, but the water authorities say there's no need for panic. And a new attempt to find out what's causing those corn circles. Now the time is 6:14.
Tonight's headlines: one of the two national electricity companies, Powergen, may be sold off to a private buyer without being offered to the public. Mrs. Thatcher has carried out a reshuffle of her junior ministers. She's moved some of her close allies to Foreign Office jobs. And Karen Smith, arrested in Thailand on charges of heroin smuggling, warns other teenagers to take care, and she's maintaining her innocence. Local education authorities will now be allowed to offer local pay deals to try to solve their problems of teacher shortages. In the House of Commons, the Education Secretary, John McGregor, confirmed that the authorities and the governors of grant-maintained schools will be able to pull out of national arrangements and set the pay and conditions of their teachers locally.
Otherwise you get the face for.
Teachers lost the right to negotiate their pay after strikes 4 years ago. Now, free negotiation with their council employers is being restored, but not until 1992. The new twist, prompted by growing teacher shortages, particularly in some subjects and some parts of the country, is that councils can opt out of national negotiations and strike their own pay deals. This gives them greater flexibility to offer pay premiums to teachers in short supply.
I think that it's important to get greater differentials in individual teachers' pay to address particular issues like the shortage in certain subjects. It is therefore necessary, I believe, to have that flexibility that increasingly we are getting in the system.
The teacher unions and most employers oppose the plan, saying government limits on council spending mean there's little scope for pay premiums. They predict chaos as employers chase an inadequate supply of teachers.
It's a real diversion from the main issue. What we need to retain and recruit teachers is a national pay deal with local flexibility. Allowing individual local authorities to opt out will just move the problem from one area to another.
Schools that have opted out of council control will also be able to strike their own pay deals, a further boost to the type of school the Prime Minister wants to see many more of.
The British Board of Film Classification is being challenged by a South London businessman over its ban on a Pakistani film which depicts the fictional death of the author Salman Rushdie. The world rights to the film, International Gorillas, are owned by Mohammed Fayez, who says he's prepared to go to court in an attempt to overturn the ban. The board refused to grant the film a certificate after legal advice that it constituted a serious case of criminal libel. The board's director said it was the most difficult decision the board has ever made.
The Rushdie film, which it's now illegal to sell, was attracting interest today at the South London Video Centre, which still hopes to distribute it in Britain. Mohammed Fayez has invested money in the movie with a view to a profit. But although the film portrays the author as a bloodthirsty murderer of Muslims, he also believes it will reduce violent feelings because the story ends with divine, not human, retribution.
After seeing this film, I mean, the Muslims will calm down and they will leave the matter to God. What we have proposed into the film, if we leave the matter to God, he will decide himself.
The film board's director knew Muslims would be upset by the ban on a film they see as a reply to an even more libelous book.
It is no part of board policy to stifle the just expression of such grievances. But the law requires that they be couched in moderate terms and respect the citizenship rights of all parties. A work which defamed a member of the Muslim community would be subject to the same test of British law.
Mr. Furman told me Scotland Yard feared possible public order offences if the film was circulated. This aspect of the board's decision has alarmed Mr. Rushdie's supporters.
What you've got is a so-called independent body, which we are led to believe was pressurised by Scotland Yard not to show this film in the interests of public order. Now, that actually is a very dangerous precedent.
The film board has now contacted the Tooting Video Centre to say its appeal against the ban could be heard in as little as 2 weeks' time.
The National Miners' Union is sending a 4-man delegation to Paris for a meeting tomorrow with the International Miners' Organisation, who they're suing for £1.4 million. The NUM claims the money was donated to them by Soviet miners during the year-long pit strike. All the indications are the NUM is looking to try to negotiate a settlement and avoid an expensive legal battle. The Yorkshire NUM, Arthur Scargill's power base, also called for negotiations when it met in Barnsley.
At the NUM's Yorkshire headquarters, there was a mixture of anger and confusion among the 40 area delegates today. Many of them were furious that the National Executive had so promptly resorted to issuing writs. But NEC members reported that they'd been warned that unless they took such action, they would be in breach of trust. The Yorkshire delegates then called on the NEC to open immediate negotiations with the International Miners' Organisation, the body through which Mr. Scargill established a number of secret accounts during the 1984 strike.
What we're saying now is that it's possible that there could be funds that belong to the NUM. It may not be the case, but in any event, what we should be doing is sitting down with our national officials, with the IMO, and with any other parties involved and try to sort the matter out without the necessity of going to court, which would cost us a hell of a lot of money.
But the legal process, which began with last week's NEC meeting in Sheffield, is inevitably gathering its own momentum. Tomorrow, Nottinghamshire Area Secretary Henry Richardson, together with 3 NEC colleagues, will fly to Paris to do precisely what Yorkshire miners are urging: open talks with the IMO and Peter Heathfield and Arthur Scargill, who flew out to Paris at the weekend. The incentive to negotiate a settlement of the union's claims is growing. The two sides are due to appear at the High Court on Thursday, with lawyers advising that the writ served on Mr. Scargill should be made permanent. In London, the NUM affair was on the agenda of the TUC's Finance and General Purposes Committee. Members were considering an exchange of letters in which the TUC General Secretary Norman Willis had sought fresh assurances that no money had been received from Libya. The reply from Mr. Scargill, in the minds of some members, was not felt to have cleared up the question. Mr. Willis will be asked to write seeking more answers from Mr. Scargill.
The Conservative backbench MP Nicholas Winterton is at the centre of a spectacular row with his party bosses. He claims he was threatened with being thrown out of the parliamentary party, and he describes a letter from the Chief Whip, Timothy Renton, as beyond contempt. The Whip's office says there was no such threat to withdraw the Whip, but he was sent a letter complaining he'd been continually rude and offensive to ministers.
Nicholas Winterton is a well-known Tory rebel. He's often voted against the government, and with his wife Anne, who's also an MP, they make up a celebrated husband and wife team at Westminster. The letter he's received is a reprimand from the government whips, accusing him of being absent from the Commons without notice and for having caused the government inconvenience, charges which Mr Winterton vehemently denies.
To be told that I must just toe the line and that I must not say things, I must not upset ministers. Well, all I can say is if ministers are upset by me, well, then perhaps they don't deserve to be ministers. I do my job as I see it. I have done it consistently, and I will go on doing it consistently, and I hope both with honour and principle as well.
I think that a little bit of July madness has crept into the Whip's office, because if they were going to pick a fight with anyone with their bully boy tactics, they picked the wrong man.
In a letter circulating at Westminster, denying his conduct is unbecoming for a Tory MP, Mr Winterton rebukes the Chief Whip, only adding to speculation of disciplinary action.
Frayed tempers at Westminster are nothing new at the end of the session. But what makes this row so unusual for the Tories is that it's become such a public slanging match, which their political opponents say reveals nervousness in the government.
A 24-year-old man has been jailed for 12 months for his role in an anti-poll tax riot at Hackney Town Hall in East London. Neil Harding, a record producer who lives in Hackney, was found guilty of affray and assault. He denied the charges. Passing sentence, the judge said, "In my opinion, there's no other way of dealing with you than to impose an immediate jail sentence."
There have now been 15 days without rain in southern and eastern areas of England, and that makes it technically an absolute drought. But the Water Services Association says it has no plans to ration water yet. However, in parts of the country where water comes from underground sources, water companies say stocks are running low, and more than 2 million people are already banned from using hose pipes.
The most serious intensification of the drought is in East Anglia, with the National Rivers Authority urging local water companies to reduce demand. Watering parched crops draws off massive quantities in this region. Reservoirs are at low levels, but the real worry here is the drying up of underground sources. The NRA, talking of a very real risk of serious problems, says aquifers across the region are at or near record lows. This follows a sequence of dry winter, hot summer, another dry winter, the second driest spring in 90 years and the current heat wave. Economies are essential immediately.
We could face that terrible situation in this autumn where the environment is acutely under stress, rivers dry up, and people get very concerned about that. And the ultimate, of course, is you could turn on your tap at home and have no water.
And facing increasing problems is the southeast, with 2 million people now banned from using hose pipes. The water companies say supplies are adequate. The problem is in pumping water to the consumer. And here, as elsewhere in the country, huge quantities of water, up to 25% of the total supply in some areas, are being lost through leakages. The drought in the south and east begins officially at midnight. That'll be 15 days with no rain at all. But, say the suppliers, drought doesn't mean shortage, and standpipes and water cuts remain distant memories of 1976. Nevertheless, the water companies would love to see some rain.
Within the last few minutes, we've learned that Labour's shadow cabinet has approved the details of the party's alternative to the poll tax. They've endorsed the idea of bringing back the domestic rates, but linking them more closely to people's ability to pay. The Labour leader, Neil Kinnock, said the scheme would be fairer than the poll tax and cheaper to collect.
A special surveillance operation has been set up in Wiltshire to try to discover the origin of the flattened corn circles that have been appearing on fields all over southern England. It's been suggested that the strange shapes have been formed by anything from flying saucers and whirlwinds to hedgehogs and rabbits. Now, Operation Blackbird will use heat-seeking cameras and round-the-clock vigilance to try to discover the true force behind the mysterious marks.
At harvest time, every farmer keeps a close eye on his crops. But for the next 3 weeks, these Wiltshire fields will be under 24-hour surveillance. Video cameras and microphones will record everything that happens, and the pictures will be studied minutely by a team of observers. This is what they hope to see, another of the crop circles that have baffled farmers and scientists. Theories about the causes behind the increasingly intricate patterns range from whirlwinds to UFOs. Now, amateur enthusiasts who've studied the phenomenon for 10 years have asked the BBC and Japanese television to find an answer. Operation Blackbird will use heat-seeking cameras to watch the crops through the night.
Every summer for the past 12 years, crop circles have formed in this field. This year, Operation Blackbird hopes to catch the patterns returning on videotape.
We hope to see the energies that are causing these things. We hope to establish whether there is an airborne component or whether it is in fact a ground earth energy effect. That certainly we're going to be able to ascertain by high quality film.
But the mystery behind the strange patterns in the fields may still prove elusive. Last year, Mr. Andrews and his friends watched one field for 10 days, only to find that a circle had appeared in a field directly behind them.
Just time to remind you of the main changes announced within the hour in Mrs Thatcher's reshuffle of her junior and middle-ranking ministers. Colin Moynihan moves from sport to the Department of Energy. Francis Maud takes over as Financial Secretary to the Treasury, a post left vacant by Peter Lilly's appointment as Trade and Industry Secretary. Moving to the Foreign Office, the Deputy Chief Whip Tristan Garrell-Jones and Mark Lennox-Boyd, Mrs Thatcher's Parliamentary Private Secretary. The biggest surprise appears to be the return to the government of Sir George Young, a leading poll tax rebel. And that's the 6 o'clock news. Good evening.
Good evening to you all. We're not forecasting any crop circles. We're not even forecasting any rain for the next few days, not any rain worthwhile anyway. But if it is cool and wet weather you want, perhaps Scandinavia is the place to be, because today it's been a driving northerly wind. Temperature in northern Sweden around 10 degrees this afternoon. Some heavy rain, some thunderstorms too. And some thunderstorms further south across the Alps and in northwestern parts of Spain and Portugal. But sandwiched in between, still very hot over southern France. The temperature, again today, not far away from 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Well, that's the reason for the strong wind blowing down across Scandinavia, those isobars in there. But we've got high pressure, fairly light winds across much of the British Isles. Fine and settled and warm, if anything, getting a bit warmer over the next few days. Now, for many eastern parts of Britain today, it was fairly cloudy earlier on, but that cloud gradually burnt away back to the coast as the day went through. But then we found some more cloud rolling in across Ireland, making the sunshine there rather hazy, and it's still there. But for many people, it's a lovely evening, plenty of warm sunshine around, just the very outside chance of a shower getting into Cornwall and the Channel Islands in the next few hours before they retreat away into northern France. So some more cloud just rolling back in off the North Sea later on tonight, but it will be very patchy and certainly not as extensive as it was last night, with further higher cloud rolling down through Ireland and moving through into the Channel before the end of the night. Quite a cool night again in the north and the east of the country. Last night the temperature fell to 2 at Aviemore, would you believe? I think tonight generally 6 to 8 degrees on the eastern side of the country. A warmer, stickier 12 or 13, the mid-50s Fahrenheit in more western districts. Tomorrow then for the eastern side of Britain and for the south as well, I think we're going to find some sunshine, but a little bit of cloud around first thing. But the best of the sunshine when you wake up will be in these more central and western parts of the country. Now gradually through the day we will find some more higher cloud rolling into these more northwestern districts. That's going to make the sunshine over in the west a little bit more hazy through the afternoon into the evening, with the best of the sunshine by then over central and eventually eastern parts of the country, with 1 or 2 patches of cloud still lingering around that eastern coast. But it will be a smashing day with temperatures every bit as high as today, perhaps a fraction higher in some spots, around about 22 to 24 degrees, but again with onshore breezes down that eastern coast, you may be lingering around 18 or 19. That's just the mid-60s Fahrenheit. Not a bad day though. That's it from me for now.
Thursday, a new series of Play on One, beginning with Anthony Sher and Eleanor Bron in Changing Step.
Shall I be required to do any actual nursing at first?
Oh, good gracious, I shouldn't think so. With not so much as a home nursing certificate.
You'll fail in this. You haven't the strength.
Please, no, she'll have to.
I'm not a nurse, I'm a miss. Apparently you saw... Oh!
Shall we be truly wicked this evening?
Don't do that. You don't get to do that. Just speak to me.
I shall resign.
Romance blooms in the first of a new series, The Play on One, Thursday at 9:30.
Now on BBC1, Midlands Today with David Davis and Diane Kemp.
Death or 25 years in prison, the bleak prospect for Karen Smith.
I'd rather be shot.
Good evening. Also in tonight's programme, From Russia with Love. Children from Chernobyl arrive here in the Midlands.
And In Touch, how computers are giving hope to the blind youngsters.
But first tonight, one of the 2 Midlands teenagers charged with drug smuggling offences in Thailand has continued to protest her innocence while giving her first television interview to Midlands Today. 18-year-old Karen Smith from Solihull is expected to make her first court appearance tomorrow or possibly on Wednesday. She insists she is the victim of an international drugs ring that intended to use her and 17-year-old Patricia Cahill from Birmingham to smuggle heroin across the world. The 2 girls were arrested at Bangkok airport in Thailand last Wednesday. They'd been planning to travel to Amsterdam in Holland, and from there their destination was to have been the Gambia in West Africa. They'd booked their tickets in advance, but by doing so had alerted customs officers. Here, the police have discounted some of the fanciful stories of increased undercover activity in the hunt for a drugs ring in Birmingham. And the owner of the pink Porsche car mentioned in some reports has denied any connection with drugs. The man who lives in Small Heath admits he did once give the girls a lift in his car, but he says that's the only occasion he met them. Karen Smith's brother revealed he was trying to trace the people who he claims lured his younger sister unwittingly into the drugs trade, including a man called Adrian. Well, we've 2 reports tonight. The first from our correspondent in Bangkok, Richard Jurich.
In her first television interview since her arrest, Karen told me she and Patricia had been tricked into carrying the drugs. A Chinaman gave them 2 suitcases full of food containers.
A guy called Sean passed into us in the Grace Hotel. He said they were sweets, and we was to take them over to Adrian in Gambia, or Banjul. Take them over to him because they don't sell them over there. I did open a few of them. They did have, well, I opened the shampoo bottles anyway. They did have shampoo in there, so I didn't think twice about it. I just put my suitcase in the water.
And who is Adrian?
A white guy from England.
When you were given the suitcases and Sean, the Chinese man, asked you this, were you not at all suspicious?
Yeah, that's why I opened them. But they did have the liquid in them, so I didn't think anything of it. I mean, they were fully sealed, lifted. There was nothing that was showing they'd been opened.
On Wednesday, it's thought Karen will be transferred to a women's prison, but for the moment, she's being held in a police cell. She sleeps on the concrete floor and shares the limited space with 2 Thai women who speak only a few words of English.
When I first came, there was about 7 people in the cell. The toilet's got about 3 inches deep of water towards the toilet. It's disgusting. Right.
That you're being well treated?
I'm being well treated, yeah. Apart from the bathroom, if you want to call it that. It's not even a bathroom, it's a swimming pool. It's a paddling pool, dirty water in it.
You seem remarkably relaxed, given the predicament that you're in. Why are you so cheerful still?
I'm telling the truth, that's why. Why shouldn't I be?
Eric Smith spent an hour with his daughter today. He said he'd stay in Thailand for as long as possible. Patricia's parents are also here. Their daughter has been interviewed again today. The British Embassy said for the Thai police to build a case history of the girls' movements.
Thailand's year-round warmth and relative cheapness attracted 95,000 British tourists last year alone. Many of them, like Karen Smith and Patricia Cahill, are young and impressionable. They make easy prey for the drugs barons who, when there's millions of pounds to be made, think nothing of the young lives they're ruining. In this case, the lives of 2 girls from the Midlands who, if convicted, won't be going home for a very long time.
The Thai government is making a concerted effort to stop the evil trade by wiping out the opium poppy fields in the notorious Golden Triangle where Thailand, Burma and Laos meet. But the heroin is still getting through, carried mostly, wittingly or unwittingly, by couriers recruited on the streets of Bangkok. If the case goes against you, and you end up having to spend 25 years in prison...
I'd rather be shot. I'd rather be shot. I really would. I'd rather be shot at World War than be shot.
That's awful.
And it isn't awful. I'd rather do that instead of 25 years. I'll be 43 when I come out.
Karen Smith and Patricia Cahill were put on the road to prison in Bangkok when their tickets were bought for them 3 weeks ago at the offices of the Dutch airline KLM in London. The customs and excise officials in Britain had no interest in the girls until £3,600 was paid for them to travel to 3 of the biggest drugs areas in the world. Their ages, the destinations, and the ease with which the tickets were paid for alerted the security system set up by customs to catch potential drugs couriers. Undercover customs investigators in Thailand were contacted, and the girls were constantly watched after arriving there. The case has brought the girls to the attention of the West Midlands Drug Squad, who previously had no interest in them. They're following developments in Thailand. Innocent or guilty, their plight shows how young people can fall prey to the drugs dealers.
Some of them have had sizable debt problems. Some have felt driven to act as courier to fund their own drug use, for example. Some have been persuaded into acting as courier because somebody they know already does it, and perhaps that person minimises the risks.
While Karen Smith's father remains with her in Bangkok, the rest of her family in Solihull says they're still convinced she's innocent and are trying to trace people with whom she was associated in Birmingham's clubland.
The makers of a television documentary in which a former terrorist confesses to have planted the Birmingham bombs have been criticised for not naming him. A Conservative MP says Granada Television should be prosecuted under the Prevention of Terrorism Act for withholding his identity. Granada says the man has been known to the police for several years. Mark Foster reports.
21 people died and 162 others were injured when bombs went off in 2 city centre pubs in 1974. 6 men arrested shortly after the bombings are currently serving life sentences. But in tonight's World in Action programme, a former terrorist says only 2 members of an active IRA unit planted the bombs and the 6 are innocent. To comply with a Home Office order, his voice has been replaced with that of an actor.
These 6 people are innocent. I have never met these 6 guys before in my life. The first I ever saw of them was when I saw photographs of them in the papers, on television.
Campaigners for the 6 say it's important new evidence which strengthens their case, but they're angry it's taken 16 years to come out.
The crime committed was absolutely vile, and a lot of people suffered, a lot of people died, families have been left behind, and they have suffered during the last 16 years. 6 men have done 16 years in prison each, and he's actually walked free.
One Birmingham MP has accused Granada of trial by media, and he says they should be prosecuted if they don't reveal the man's identity.
What the Granada television programme says is that we know who it is. He says that some people weren't guilty, and that's enough for us. Well, if Granada's going to go on as they have done now for once or twice in siding with the IRA, in my view, somebody's got to call a halt to this and they should be prosecuted.
Earlier this year, Granada made a drama documentary claiming to identify the IRA men who carried out the bombings. It says the authorities have known for years who this man is. A spokesman for the programme said today, "We are not withholding anything." The Home Secretary, David Waddington, said he would carefully consider the programme as part of the general investigation into the Birmingham 6. West Midlands Police, along with the Devon and Cornwall team currently investigating the 6 men's case, and the DPP would not comment beyond saying they'd watch tonight's programme with interest.
Mark Foster reporting. Prisoners from Strangeways Jail, the scene of riots earlier this year, have damaged a Midlands police station where they were being held. They smashed fittings in toilets at Hucknall near Nottingham. The town's MP has written to the Home Office saying the prisoners shouldn't have been moved there. As Paul McRae reports, his constituents are angry too.
The 15 Strangeways prisoners have been in Nottinghamshire since the start of last month. For much of the time they were held in cells in Nottingham Central Police Station. Then last Thursday, amid fears of overcrowding, they were transferred to the smaller station several miles away in Hucknall. Last night at 8 o'clock they were let out of their cells for exercise. They refused to return to them. According to a police statement, the prisoners barricaded themselves into an area of the station using mattresses. A squad of senior officers was called. After half an hour, the men were persuaded to give themselves up. They've been taken to police cells in the centre of Nottingham. Hucknall Police Station is close to shops and homes. News of the disturbance and the presence of Strangeways prisoners has angered people living nearby.
And I think they've got enough on
sorting his own people out without sorting his own end out without going and bringing trouble from elsewhere.
That's a view echoed by the town's MP, who says no one told him Hucknall Station was holding such men.
I've already dictated a letter to the Minister concerned for prisons asking that members of Parliament everywhere in the country should be notified if prisoners of this calibre is moved into local police cells. Local police cells are not the place for high calibre of prisoners such as we witnessed for those who were on the roof at Strangeways.
What's not yet clear is how extensive the damage was or how much it'll cost to repair. No one from the police would be interviewed. Their statement merely mentioned damage to fittings in the toilets.
The National Trust is to hold an inquiry into an accident at one of its stately homes in the region. An incident in which two young brothers were injured by a falling tree at Cork Abbey in Derbyshire. They're both comfortable in hospital.
Lewis and Ryan Farnsworth were playing in the car park at Cork Abbey when they heard a creaking sound and saw a beech tree toppling towards them. The brothers, who are 8 and 10 and come from Hatton in Derbyshire, tried to run clear but were caught by the top branches. One was trapped for a short while before he was pulled free by his father. Both boys were taken to Burton District Hospital with head injuries. The National Trust says the trees are regularly inspected, but has promised a full inquiry into the incident.
Lisa Manning. An inquiry has also been launched into the circumstances surrounding the death of a young mother in North Staffordshire. An inquest last week recorded a misadventure verdict on the 19-year-old who died after taking an overdose of antidepressants. Robin Latcham reports.
Sharon Pope grew up in Leek, then moved with her parents to Birmingham. In the new year, she and her young baby went into temporary holiday accommodation near Leek to be close to relatives. After 3 months, she had to leave and registered as homeless with the Staffordshire Moorlands District Council. But the housing department said that she wasn't their responsibility. Eventually, social workers found her a room at a bedsit in the town. Last week's inquest heard she became depressed and died after taking an overdose. Today, George Allen, the District Council's housing chairman, said there will be a full inquiry into the case. The inquiry would consider if he or the housing department was guilty of wrongdoing or maladministration.
A father has failed in an attempt to force the Leicestershire Education Authority to give him access to his children's school reports. David Cannon, who's divorced, claims the authority won't allow him to monitor his 3 children's progress because they aren't in his custody. Mr Cannon, who's secretary of a pressure group called Families Need Fathers, lost a hearing in the High Court in London.
A magistrate cleared his court this afternoon because poll tax protesters were demonstrating from the public gallery. The hearing in Dudley was moved to an adjoining court with the campaigners excluded. It was the first time in Dudley that non-payers of the charged had been summoned. The hearings in the court began while outside the Anti-Poll Tax Federation showed opposition in various ways. The organisation is encouraging defendants to take up as much legal time as possible. It's claimed that at the present rate, it'll take 15 years to process the cases in Dudley.
A member of the Royal Warwickshire Regiment who survived a massacre of British soldiers in the Second World War has died. He was in his 80s. Reg West featured in a BBC Midlands documentary last month in which the survivors campaigned to bring to justice the man they believed was responsible for the massacre.
30 children from the Chernobyl area of the Soviet Union are on a month-long visit to the region. They were living only a mile from the nuclear reactor there when it exploded in 1986. Harry Gibson has been following the youngsters' progress in Nottinghamshire.
When the Chernobyl reactor exploded 4 years ago, the area for miles around was left uninhabitable. The fallout from the explosion affected thousands of people. These children are amongst those who carry the effects. This trip aims to give them a taste of life in the East Midlands, as well as letting the East Midlands get a look at them. Today's stop was at the Nottingham City Council offices. There was a chance to meet and listen to the Lord Mayor. Like children anywhere, though, their attention was prone to wander. The trip has been set up by the Nottingham Ukrainian Women's Organisation.
Although they've been evacuated to Lviv, which is in the western Ukraine, their future at the moment is still uncertain because they are suffering from various sorts of illnesses.
The children have plenty of treats in store, including visits to other parts of the Midlands. They seem impressed by what they've seen so far.
We've managed to Nottingham. Yeah.
I think that the main differences are that, as far as I'm aware, although I don't know, I haven't seen a lot of Nottingham yet, that Lviv is a smaller city than Nottingham, and of course there's a lot more things to buy in Nottingham than there are at home.
By the end of the 3.5-week visit, it's hoped the exchange of cultures will have benefited everyone. An appeal is now underway in Nottingham supporting the Chernobyl Children Relief Fund.
A university centre carrying out unique research to help blind and partially sighted people says more places should be set up just like it. They're needed because the number of visually handicapped people is rising every year. Over the last decade, government figures show the total number of blind and visually handicapped has risen by 53,000 because of our ageing population. But independent experts believe the real figure could be 3 times that. The centre at the University of Birmingham says now more work should be directed at the elderly. But with the numbers of blind people increasing in their millions worldwide, the centre also has a special programme for the very young.
While these children aren't totally blind, they are severely visually handicapped. They often have at most peripheral or blurred vision. They come 4 days a week to this special play centre, the first of its kind in Britain. Colourful surroundings help their limited vision. The play centre's designed to develop their other senses, particularly touch. For those children both visually and severely physically handicapped, touch is sometimes all they have.
There she is.
2-year-old Laura can see only about 8 feet. Through touch-sensitive screens, she and the other children are introduced to computers that will be increasingly central to their future education and work. The extra stimulation's important.
Before, she used to be quite awkward, and it was really hard finding new things to make her try, because she never used to bother. But since she's been coming here with all the different children and different things, she's just a lot happier, and she copes better with everything that she does.
Upstairs, the staff show the chairman of the Royal National Institute for the Blind, here to open the centre, how computers can also work for the adult visually handicapped.
So then we want that in Braille now for the record, don't we?
Yes, right.
Dear Mr. Watson, thank you very much for coming along to open our centre, and we do hope that you and Mrs. Watson will enjoy your afternoon with us. I'm an unashamed fan of the centre. I think it does a great job in educational research because it's not academically led, it's needs led. And I think what it's doing here in developing these technical aids, and you only have to think for a minute, if I'm, as I was in fact, a solicitor before I retired, I could learn to use a machine like this. I could write a letter to my client in print and I could keep myself a Braille copy of it.
But despite the centre's 21 years of good work, they can't afford to be complacent. 4-year-old Kaylee, who lost both eyes through cancer, is one of the rapidly growing numbers of blind in Britain. But she's young. In fact, an ageing population means ever more elderly people are going blind. The centre's director believes though the old will lose their sight, with help they shouldn't lose their fight.
Not only are there more of them, but of course they're making more demands upon themselves and upon the community. They're not willing to sit by the fire anymore. They want to go on having holidays. They want to make a contribution to their community. And of course, to do that, they need people like us to be finding out what the problems are and how to solve them. They can then go on giving to the community and not just taking.
Birmingham University has 100 students currently training to work with the blind. The research centre believes they, and the centre's own work, will be essential if the numbers of the older and younger visually handicapped continue their predicted inexorable rise.
James Roberson reporting there. Now, there aren't many new football managers who are introduced by their chairman with the words, "Anyone recognise him?" It happened at Villa Park over the weekend, Steve.
And apparently no one did. Yes, Aston Villa's decision to appoint a Czechoslovakian team manager is still the main talking point in Midlands sport tonight. Josef Vengloš won't be returning to Birmingham until the beginning of August, but his unexpected appointment is still making the news here, not least amongst the Aston Villa players.
The Villa players trained this morning less than 24 hours after returning from a 10-day tour of Sweden. News of Josef Venglos's appointment as manager reached them on Saturday night, minutes after completing their final game. It wasn't a name that had been part of their speculation.
I think we were all expecting one of the names that were being bandied about to get the job, one of the English managers. And I don't think anyone even thought about anyone from the continent.
John Ward, Villa's assistant manager, has been told his position at the club is safe.
It's been indicated to us that the manager and the chairman would like us to stay together and continue the work. That will have to be resolved, obviously, when the new manager comes in and see what ideas and what work he wants people to do. And once we sort that, we'd be happy to work together.
Not surprising, even a posse of usually well-informed sports journalists was caught on the hop when Chairman Doug Ellis introduced the new man at Villa Park on Saturday.
Introduce you to you, our new manager, and we'll have a little guessing game. How many of you know him?
Josef Venglos led Czechoslovakia in Italian 90. They went out to the West Germans. His impressive CV includes 2 spells in charge of the national side, 3 seasons with Slovan Bratislava, twice Czech champions, a term leading the Australian national side, and taking Czechoslovakia to the World Cup in Spain 8 years ago. On Saturday, the Villa faithful took to him immediately at the stage-managed presentation for the benefit of the media.
Of course, we are going to keep coaches and staff who has been working with Grant Taylor, and I will speak with him as soon as possible. Of course, he's very busy now too, but I'm sure we shall have a time to have a discussion and to spread out experience.
The signing took place barely 2 hours after finalising details. A surprised Villa playing staff have yet to discover if the philosopher coach, he's got a PhD and speaks Russian, Portuguese and English, can match the quality of management demonstrated by Graham Taylor in his 3 years at Villa Park.
And we stay on a soccer theme. 24 league sides from England and Scotland have sent their finest young players to the Midlands. They're taking part in the Reebok International Football Festival. Clubs like Glasgow Rangers, Villa, Forest and Derby have all sent teams.
It's July, it's hot, it must soon be time for soccer again. After the World Cup took us into June, the reminders are here that the new English season isn't too far away. Today, the start of a soccer tournament that covers the entire region all week. Bodymore Heath, Villa's training ground, is just one of 4 venues for this festival. The other sites are at Coventry, Kiel and Nottingham. Some leading league sides have sent their under-16 players. This was Villa against Glasgow Rangers, one of the competition's more favoured sides. Most of the boys, fired up by World Cup action and some degree of English soccer success, couldn't wait for things to begin.
I think that the visual is often better than the spoken, and the fact that the youngsters have seen some super football, particularly from the England side during the World Cup, I think that they will be only too pleased to get into their footballing games now and start the season so that they can express themselves out on the field.
Recent rule changes have meant that clubs can now play at under-16 level. Coaches believe it's a good idea, stopping youngsters from playing too much outside football. The final of this tournament takes place at Birmingham's Alexander Stadium on Friday night.
Now, if you thought your weekend was a little on the strenuous side, then spare a thought for those in the Malvern Hills Classic. The country's biggest ever mountain bike race even attracted more than 1,000 riders. It was hot, it was dusty and tiring.
In the high-tech fitness world of the 90s, the mountain bike is a must. They're becoming so popular that the enthusiasts can't wait to try them out on the roughest terrain available. It was sometimes a case of too many bikes spoiling the start, but on the whole, those at the Eastnor Deer Park in Herefordshire enjoyed inflicting pain on themselves on both Saturday and Sunday. The age range here was 9 to 50-something, the mileage from a modest 8 to a back-breaking 32 miles. It's not only these bikes that can cost a lot, the prize money was pretty impressive too. £15,000 worth of prizes were up for grabs. For the professionals, a serious business. For the others, just a question of trying to keep cool, while all around them others were cursing the summer's warmest spell.
I bet they were. Well, finally, sport, there's just one cricket result today. In the tour match at Grace Road between Leicestershire and India, that game has ended in a draw.
Well, just before tonight's weather, a reminder to put your address on the back of your picture if you're sending one. Jane Wan didn't, so if you're her parents, please send us your address. We can send her the T-shirt. Anyway, on to tonight's picture. It comes from Ben Clues, who's 8 and a half and goes to Ipsley First School in Redditch. After a very generally sunny evening. Tonight will stay dry and clear, temperature down to 9 degrees. Tomorrow may start cloudy in the east, but by midday it should be sunny everywhere with a temperature of 19, and there'll be little change in the afternoon, dry and sunny with temperature higher than today's 23 degrees Celsius.
And now for tonight's main headlines. Labour has criticised the government's plans for selling off the electricity industry. It may be sold to a single private buyer rather than to the public. And in the Prime Minister's ministerial reshuffle, amongst the more interesting appointments, the MP for Warwickshire North, Francis Maud, has been appointed Chief Financial Secretary to the Treasury.
Karen Smith, one of the 2 Midland teenagers accused of attempting to smuggle heroin out of Thailand, has insisted that she's the victim of an international drugs ring.
And that's been the Midlands today. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Join us tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Hot foot from Ramsey Street, Craig McLaughlin drops in on Monday's Wogan to find a certain Jonathan Ross in the chair. Then at 7:30, 3 budding master chefs dream up more palate pleasers for Lloyd Grossman. Talking of food...
You feed him.
A dog's dinner served strictly a la Boswell. At 8:30, the Prince of Denmark is clearly up to something.
To be... or not to be.
After the news at 9:30, Byline with Madhu Jaffrey, listening to volcanoes.
I just had a quarrel with the director. Is that what had caused the eruption? Did we do this?
At 10:20, they're tripping the light fantastic in the second round of Come Dancing 90. And at 10:45, Miami's finest.
Move in, it's going down.
And this is Monday Night on One. Thank you very much. Oh, really? Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Fellas.